Hi kids, let's learn how to animate pornography. Yay! Yes. If you ever wondered how animation is done, you probably shouldn't be watching this video. Seriously, there's lots of tutorials online, books, microfiche, etc. Plus I only started even trying to learn how to animate a few months ago. Technically I'm still a novice, but for what it's worth, this is how I do it. Okay, there's basically three main programs you can use. You'll need one of them: Adobe Flash, After Effects, or Toon Boom. Adobe Flash was developed mainly for web applications, mainly advertisements, menus. It hasn't improved much over the years, so its strength is still basic tweening and interactive elements. If you want to animate something like a banner or a menu, or other things, this is the best program to do it in. After Effects is a good program. I don't have a lot of experience with it, but it's mainly used for special effects or rigging. I haven't had a reason to use special effects yet, and almost every time I draw, it's something unique, and I don't reuse character models, so there's no reason for me to rig a model. Two Snacks uses this program and animates with rigging, which is basically just giving a complicated skeleton to a ton of drawing layers for a single character. That way you can use the same drawing for pretty much forever. He animates the Two Best Friends stuff that way, and that pony show that he loves, and those awful, awful Canadian cartoons. You can learn more about horse sex at Two Snacks' channel. Check it out. Now for Toon Boom. Toon Boom has the stupidest name and has like a million versions of itself, but it's still an industry standard for hand drawing animation. I use it. It's kind of complicated to set up though. Plus, every button on your keyboard is turned into a doomsday device in Toon Boom. While you're working, you will all the time be just accidentally hitting a key, and you don't know which one it was, that does something that can potentially destroy your entire project. Don't expect your first animation in Toon Boom or any of these programs to be very good. If you have no experience in any of these things, you're probably going to be fighting them for months trying to figure them out. But I will also add that this is true with pretty much any program. I've been using Photoshop for years, for example. I've had several jobs where I was responsible for teaching whole rooms full of savages how to use it. And I still don't even know half the things you can do with the damn thing. But that's just how it goes. You know, everyone uses the program differently. It's not about how well you know the program so much as how clever you are with the things that you do know. And that's how animation is, too. A lot of it is just problem solving. That's how a lot of things in life are. Animation, marriage, drug addiction, being the President of the United States. It's not whether you know everything, it's how good you are at abusing what you do know. Drink your milk, kids. Starting up Toon Boom, first off, I'll go over the birds and bees of animation. Stuff no one ever showed me. Stuff that left my first girlfriend face down in a pool of blood and discarded animation cells. Horrible. First, right off the bat, let's go into your keyboard shortcuts. Now, just look at this mess. I want to kill myself, just looking at it. But don't kill yourself. Not yet. We do that during the rendering phase. Just try to keep in mind that you shouldn't delete any of these settings right away. But if you keep hitting a key that, say, deletes every single drawing in your timeline and can't be undone and seems to automatically save the file so that 100% of your work is ruined forever, which happened to me for the first few weeks, you need to get rid of that damn button. Secondly, and this is super useful, you should probably start just by trying to draw an ordinary picture on a single frame, then export that thing. This is how I got used to things. I started drawing pictures like I was just working in Photoshop. Unfortunately, saving a picture in Toon Boom is really complicated. You first have to go up to Window, Network, and then change the export setting from TGA to something like JPG or whatever. If you want transparency so that you can, see through crap, choose PNG 4. Normal PNG will just make your transparency black. After that, you can go back to Render Network in your file menu and make sure you're only exporting this one frame that you want exported. Otherwise, it'll try to export all of them. And if you have a few thousand frames of animation, guess what? You can now kill yourself. And finally, make sure that you have your own workspace. Make sure that you make your own. Otherwise, none of these wonderful settings will be saved, and the next time you start the program, you'll have to do it all over again. Now, like I said, any art program has a ton of different tools and ways of doing stuff. A lot of these things you can figure out on your own, so I'm just going to go over what I think is important. First, Guess what this big area is, and what it does. If you don't know, you should probably give up the idea of animating just right now. Just stop. It's the canvas. Move the canvas around by holding down the spacebar. You can rotate it by holding Control and Alt at the same time. Reset the camera after you screwed everything up by hitting Shift plus M. Now, guess what? I have probably just saved you 5 years of your life, and countless nights full of tears and murder and incest. But now, down here is your timeline, which we will get into later. That's where nightmares come from. Instead, let's look at the toolbar. I'll try to go straight down, but first I'll show you the brush tool, because that's where our boobies will be born. Flash's brush and line tools look like a sack of dog vomit compared to Toon Boom's. Flash has the tendency to make really wobbly or ugly lines unless you hold its hand. Toon Boom autocorrects like crazy and has really smooth looking lines. Depending on your tablet and its settings, you should probably have a really small minimum brush size and a very high maximum brush size. This way you can control your line depth pretty easily. If you want more detail, try dropping the max setting down so you aren't making huge blobs all over the place. If you've gone mad with power, you can even lower the min size down to little bitty decibels. Or decibels, whatever. Now that that's out of the way, your select tool selects crap, cut tool cuts crap. Now, watch this. 2 lines overlap, select tool moves them, cut tool cuts them. Or I can just cut through one of the branches of poop and it's flushed into poop heaven. Pretty useful for drawing quickly, make a ton of line strokes, then cut them all off. Personally, my line control is good enough that I can avoid wasting time even bothering switching to this tool, and I'll just end the stroke where it needs to be to begin with. Now, along with the brush tool, there's something called the pencil tool. But they're basically the same thing. Plus, the brush tool gives you length and girth. And the ladies like length and girth in their tools. Even if they say that it doesn't matter. It does matter. They want you to lie to them. But they don't want to know that you're lying to them. Because it's the illusions in life that embody the very fabric of the human soul itself. They need the lies to live. So the pencil can go fuck itself. Moving on, here's the text tool. Guess what it does? Also there's an eraser, but I honestly never use it. If I make a mistake, I just Control-Z it away, or I use the cut tool. Here's the paint bucket. It works like it would in MS Paint if you ever used that. As you can see, you can do all sorts of stuff with it. Play with all these options. They're pretty self-explanatory. But down here at the bottom, this is super important. This is the stroke tool. Now, I will mention that in any of these programs, you're drawing in vector, not raster. Don't know what that means? Of course not. Raster is Photoshop. Vector is Illustrator. One looks like paint. One is really, really clean. Raster is a single pixel containing information on what the pixel's color is. Vector is a series of numbers that mathematically tells a program how to automatically draw and render shapes and colors. Congratulations! You just graduated Graphic Design 1. No need for college, kids. But Toon Boom is vector. Pressing the letter K will show you all vector information. When you make a brush stroke, it's actually making several of these invisible lines at the same time, and it's filling them in automatically with whatever color your brush is to make it look like a brush stroke. Now, the stroke tool makes one of these invisible lines without bothering to use any color. This may sound worthless to you now, but once you start trying to do stuff like making people blink or shading people's bodies, this tool is going to make your dick rock hard, or clitorati, whatever you people have in there. When you drive home after work, you're going to be thinking about the nasty things you'll do to the stroke tool once you get in the door. It's great. The stroke tool is a freak, and it knows it. It's a nasty girl, nasty girl. Moving on, you can make pretty gradients by doing this thing. Go over to your swatches, make a new one, double-click it, then change it to a gradient. You can make it linear or radial, and all sorts of other things. Play with this crap. Technically, you can draw lines with a gradient swatch, but it looks just awful. Instead, use the paint bucket to fill in closed areas with your new rainbow crap. But, going back up for a second, there's a tool up here that lets you adjust your gradients. Select the tool, then select where you painted a gradient, and you can do all sorts of heinous things to it. Gradients don't have human rights, so do whatever you want. If it starts to cry, just remember that it's basically just an animal. The line tool is useful sometimes. You can make simple shapes or poly shapes. Hold down shift to make sure you're drawing these things at the right angle, or that you're maintaining their shape. If you release the shift key, your shape lets itself go and just lays around eating chocolates all day. Okay, that's all the actually important stuff for now. Now it's time for the timeline. The timeline will destroy your marriage, break your soul, turn your children against you, and God help us, bring peace without honor. The timeline is your enemy. You're going to come home one day and find it in bed with stroke tool, and probably your spouse too. Do not trust it. Do not trust the timeline. It may be your business partner, but it's also your enemy. Remember that. Now, this is a frame. 24 frames by default is a single second of animation. If you want to animate a feature film and have 2 hours worth of drawings, even if you only use one layer, you would still need, I think about 172,000 pictures you'd have to draw, or something like that. My math is probably wrong, but it's a lot. So you can see why all my animations are about a minute long. I'm known for being incredibly fast, but even I take several days worth of work non-stop just to make about 60 seconds worth of this crap. When you draw on the canvas, it makes a drawing in your timeline, on whatever frame you had selected. Obviously, we don't want to draw a unique drawing on every single frame, so we just want to repeat the same drawing until it has to change. Select your frame and press F5 and it'll ask you how far you want to extend the drawing. You can also just go to wherever it is that you want to extend the drawing on the timeline and press F5 and it'll do it for you. I think F5 is the standard way of doing this even in Flash. Just like F8, I think, turns things into shapes and so on. Now, finally, we start animating. First, the typical way of animating. This is called frame-by-frame animation. People have been doing this ever since King Solomon first made his first pornographic flip book. It's very ancient. This is basically making a new drawing on your timeline every time there's a change in movement, frame by frame. Let's say we're trying to get a ball to bounce from one side of the screen to the other one. First off, you won't get this right on the first try, so you want to make a primary layer. Just like in drawing, you want to start with light strokes so you can decide on what you want it to look like. In animation, you'll want to do a primary layer to give yourself an idea of what the timing is going to be like. So, let's first make a new swatch. We'll lower its opacity down to like 50 or whatever. Enough that you can see it, but low enough that whenever you start drawing over it, you can see what you're doing. Now, we'll make ourselves a primary layer and start drawing on it. You can also start using this onion skill tool over here to see a ghostly image of your last drawing as you draw the new one. It's magic. Oh, you want to know why it's called an onion skin tool? It's because your mother is a whore. Moving on. Okay, I want my ball to start here and bounce here and end here. This is called keyframing, by the way. Your most important frames when things really change the most are your keyframes. You generally draw those and then get some Korean children to fill in the ones in between. Okay, we'll animate it to check it out. But this is way too fast. So let's space these out. Okay. Animate it again. Okay, that looks about right as far as timing goes. Now we can lock this layer and start using real color. Now remember, we're doing frame by frame animation, just like dirty old King Solomon. If you draw a unique frame for the first time, it can look kind of weird once you're done, since it may look like it's moving too fast. It's generally better to use the same drawing for 2 frames, unless you're drawing something that's moving really, really fast. If it's really slow, use 3 or more frames. Okay, we have a bouncing ball. We're some real badasses now, huh? But this is frame by frame animation. It takes quite a long time, but this is basically how people used to have to animate everything. Old black and white cartoons look like this for a reason. Now we'll move on to tweening crap around the screen. This is how lazy modern perverts animate their boobs. You draw something once, then extend it as far as you want it to be animated. We'll draw our ball here, and then we'll have to animate it. And for that, we need to use this little tool right here. And make sure this little running guy is selected. For the love of God, always make sure that this is selected. Otherwise, when you start moving or drawing around, it's not animating it. It's just screwing up where everything is on the whole layer. Sometimes you may press a button that is mapped to deselect the running man. If this happens, immediately kill yourself, because this is the only excuse Timeline needs to rape your whole family, and it will. It will rape your whole family, and it'll do it with a smile on its face. It's been lusting after your stroke tool for years. Okay. Anyway, first press F6 on your first frame to set a keyframe. You'll be using the F6 key a lot. When you set a keyframe, this is basically telling Timeline not to dick around with how this frame looks. Yeah, Timeline can't get its rapey hands on your balls now, huh? Next, we'll go to where our ball is supposed to hit the ground. Make sure your running man is selected. Ignore that soap on the ground just to be safe. Now, move your balls onto the cold, hard, unforgiving floor. The program is going to keyframe this automatically, or you can set it beforehand if you want to. Now move to where your balls vanish off camera and do the same thing. Okay. Now, animate it. Notice how it'll automatically animate things in between your keyframes, but it doesn't look right, does it? Yeah. Balls are supposed to arc down when they bounce. The program doesn't know this. It's just doing what it's told. It doesn't know. It's up to your problem-solving abilities to figure out how to get this to look right. You can keyframe a few more frames in between this, but it still doesn't look right once you're done. It just ends up being the same problem. You could keyframe every frame until it's perfect, but that defeats the whole point, doesn't it? The best way to resolve this is to use the animation tool a little bit better. Let's get rid of these crappy keyframes and start over. Okay. Our ball is here, so go over to this weird crosshair tool. This little thing will set the rotation point for your whole drawing on that frame, on that layer. This probably sounds confusing, so you'll want to play with it until you get the idea. I'm going to set it down here. This way, when I tell the drawing to rotate, it'll rotate around this pivot point. The way I've decided to solve this problem with the arc of the ball bouncing is to make it rotate around this point. There are other ways of doing it, but I'm just going to show you this example. This way, when I set my next keyframe, like so, it'll have more of an arc. Now, it bounces to the center fine, but how do we get it to bounce away? Again, you have to problem solve. You can make a whole new drawing and set a new pivot point for it, but the easiest thing to do is to just change the existing point. But you notice if you use the crosshair tool, it screws up the whole drawing because you have changed where it's oriented. So instead, rather than using the crosshair tool, grab this little blue ball that's sitting out the canvas, dicking off. This is the actual pivot point. Dragging this around isn't the same thing as physically changing it for the whole drawing for some reason. I don't know, but it's useful. It just temporarily alters the pivot point for whatever you're changing. This can make the drawing wobble like crazy, since it's confusing for the program, but generally it's not a big deal unless you're really going crazy with things. Usually, especially if you're trying to make things do flips. So we'll make sure we're on the right point in the timeline when we want the ball to go off screen, and then we'll move the pivot point and rotate it off screen. Press play, and it looks okay. There's lots of things wrong with this though. The ball doesn't really distort when it hits the ground, so it doesn't look so great for one. Normally you'd have to sit here for quite a while fiddling with it until it looks right. You might also want to not use the same drawing for whenever it hits the ground, and draw it to where it's distorting a little bit and things like that. Mix and match. If this is your first time doing something like this, it'll take you absolutely forever. If you're experienced with it, this can be a lot faster than drawing things frame to frame. When you see a lot of modern Flash cartoons, this is the kind of animation that they're actually using. There's actually a secret third kind of animation, but it's not really useful aside from amorphous blob-looking shapes. It's called morphing. If you're doing something like a smoke or dust or something like that, it works pretty well. Basically, you draw one shape on the timeline, try to limit the amount of strokes you do down to one if possible. Otherwise, Toon Boom flips its shit and can't figure out what the hell is going on. Then go to another frame, wherever you want, and draw another shape, with the same number of strokes, preferably. Then select all the frames from the first one up to the frame right in front of the last one. Hit Alt plus M. There's another tool over here you can use, but I'm not even going to bother. It's just much easier to hit Alt plus M. And it'll morph all the frames in between and try to make up drawings for everything in between these two little frames. This only works for really simple shapes. So if you think you're going to draw a human head and then get it to turn around without morphing, enjoy your stay in hell, because it's not going to happen. Well, that's pretty much for the basics. When I animate things, that's basically all I use. Most of making stuff look pretty is just problem solving. Layers work the same way they do in Photoshop. If you want something on top or under something else, just put it on another layer. There's lots of little nuances to how things work in the timeline, especially, so I'd suggest just dicking around with them until you figure out the many ways the timeline will attempt to have its way with you. Whenever you're learning all this stuff, don't be afraid to use Google. I literally, whenever I first started using it, I had to stop what I was doing about every 2 or 3 minutes to research how to do something else. You feel free to ask me, but I will probably just end up ignoring you because I'm an asshole. Once you're done, export all this mess as a movie, and Toon Boom will make an MOV file out of it. Keep in mind, due to stupid legal crap, Toon Boom can't make SWF files, only FLV files. That means you could technically port the final version without audio into Flash, but in my experience it looks absolutely terrible, and it screws up a lot of the drawings because Flash just doesn't support a lot of the things Toon Boom does, especially like background transitions, some kinds of gradients, and so on. It's an inferior program that really gets by these days on just being famous for being famous. If you really want a good program, I would suggest using either Toon Boom or After Effects. I don't know much about After Effects again, but it's also a good program. I know that at least. Okay, that's pretty much it. There's hours of crap and more of this, but that should get you started. And that's an important thing. You need to just start doing it. If you do stuff like this, you tend to get a lot of people asking about wanting to learn, but they aren't really willing to learn. They just want to feel like they're trying to learn so they can complain about it not working out later. Learning crap like this isn't about viewing YouTube videos or reading professional writers' novels until you magically know how to write yourself. The only person that can make you fail is you. I know I sound like a lecherous old murderer pervert, and I am, but I'm not wrong. There's plenty of people that plan to do stuff or try a couple times and then they give up. Most people are like that, though. No one really ever tries that hard. They just pop out a couple of kids and then they die, and then their kids die. Everyone dies. I'm not even very good at this, and I'm doing alright. So you just, you gotta stick your dick in there. So if you want to grow up to be like me, stop wearing pants and start drawing filthy pictures. Alright, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'm Plague with Gripes. Bye bye.